Welcome to your awakening. Please take all as your reality is adjusted.
Oh, a little bit of feedback this week, not as bad as usual. Stop screen share, get to the right tab, that'll help. Oh, and he's doing it again. Welcome to this week's bumbling intro. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, global gulag. Yes, you are now in the global gulag. Some of it may be virtualized, as in it mainly exists in the digital part of our current world system reality, but there is also now the physical element included for many people around the world, because you are under house arrest. So yes, welcome to the partly physical, partly virtualized gulag of the modern world. So I'm just doing my multitasking, clicking different tabs and trying to get things where I want them. But good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again. Another edition of Sol Excalibre on this moon day evening. Go on application window, share. Thank you. Right, can we now see it? Yeah, can we zoom in a bit on that? That's a bit small scale. Yeah, that'll do. Right, because it wasn't very clear on the thumbnail, because the way StreamYard allows you to adjust the sizing for the thumbnail. I'm not sure if it's StreamYard that causes it or whether it's YouTube when it gets pushed to YouTube. It sort of expands the tile of the thumbnail, so it's just beyond the edges of the screen, so you couldn't quite see the full image. So screen share it now. Yes, I changed the usual thumbnail this week because I thought this would be much more appropriate at the moment. And in the in the coming weeks here in the UK, it will be even more appropriate, and you'll see why. I'll get into it in a bit. And it also relates to the title, the subtitle for this week in the info box underneath. You are the new abnormal. You are in brackets. I'll explain why, because it's simply because the main narrative has been trying to convince the general populace that at the moment this is the new normal. What's going to be happening in the near future and the continuation of a lot of the things that they've enacted, such as the lockdown, that's going to be your new normal. And I sort of mentioned this a little bit last week, and I wanted to add to that explanation that I was giving last week and extend it a bit further to talk about this concept. And then we had other news later in the week. As again, I'm referencing last week, what I said last time. I mentioned it last time that Matt Hancock, in one of his daily announcements, Matt Hancock, telegraphed the high probability, the likelihood, and as I pointed out before, in other words, they are going to do this, that the government would be making use of some form of contact tracing app or technological solution, whether it be an app on a device or whatever, however they implement it in different parts of the system. There would be a contact tracing database created, and they would, be consulting about the possibility of making use of that. And now, during the week, there has been the direct announcement that they will be doing it. They're talking at the moment. I'll do another screen share. I'll come back to that image in a bit to dig a bit further on that. But the other main point on this is in that browser. So switch to that browser. Right, hopefully you can see that now. Yeah. This is on the BBC News website. I'm sure it's been covered by other news media as well, but there's other reasons why I chose BBC this week. But the headline under the technology section, coronavirus, UK confirms plan for its own contact tracing app. This is 12th of April, but like I said, this was sort of the next step on this incrementalism stepping stone process of them announcing in Hancock's daily announcement that they were thinking about it, they were considering it. Well, yeah, now they are going to do it. And I'm not going to dig through the body of the article. There's not exactly much in it other than the BBC letting you know that this is what you will be using. This is how it works, or this is what you need to know about how it works, folks. Don't question any further. Just be afraid. Be afraid of death and be afraid of getting the illness so that you'll agree to making use of this app. But somewhere in the body here, I can't remember exactly where, but it does just sort of mention that it will be voluntary. This is not mandatory, supposedly, yet. Give them time. This is the process of incrementalism. At some stage, when the pressure builds on the essential workforce, the two-tier society system, think of that image I showed, licensed Macht frei. I couldn't be bothered trying to change the word license into German or whatever. I don't know if there is any major difference in the spelling, but yeah, two-tier society. Do you have a license to go out and work? Are you an essential worker? Then we need you to be going out and work. Therefore, it will be mandatory for you to have this system so that we can check you're okay and that you don't have the virus when we send you out to do the essential work that we require you to do. It's in the wording, folks. It's in the use of language. But eventually, for some people, they will begin a process of making this mandatory for medical workers and delivery drivers. Yeah? So somewhere in there, it does mention that it's voluntary. Their idea when they're going to roll it out initially, it will be voluntary. And they also talk about how they're consulting with Apple and Google, because Apple and Google want to create their own app. And this is an example of the corporatocracy superseding the facade, the sham, the democrascam, the illusion of government and politicians actually having any major influence over how the world is run and what goes on in the world. No, Apple and Google do not want to give the governments direct access to all the information that they will be happily gathering via an app such as this. So in other words, they want to be able to have the data first and go, oh, well, yeah, we'll let you have this bit. We're not going to tell you about this other stuff we found out. They don't want that's to our benefit. They'll claim, like they often do, that it's a good cloak that they use often. They'll claim that they're worried about the data protection of their users. So they don't want to allow the government to just do it. They've got to make the app and monitor it and control its distribution and its data gathering so that they can protect the data privacy of their users. Yeah, it's not private to them, their company. Anyway, yeah, main point I wanted to get to in this article, right near the bottom, or near enough, like one line off the bottom of the article. Quote, the Behavioral Insights team, a private company also known as the Nudge Unit, is advising the government on how to encourage as many people to download and use the app as possible, unquote, or end quote, however you like to do that. But yeah, often hear the kind of debunking attitude, or the ignorance is strength attitude of, oh, they'll never make cash illegal. They'll never make these apps a mandatory requirement. You know, they're not going to do it. They'll never get away with it because people would be too upset. Really? Look at what's happening at the moment. There's most of the nation is under house arrest. And that's just, when I say nation, I'm talking about the UK, Great Britain, whatever. But that's true for many countries around the world. The majority of their populations are under house arrest. If I'd suggested that to you 6 months ago, maybe 8 or 9 months ago, allowing for the timeline, you probably would have said the same thing. Oh, they'll never do that. People will protest. People won't put up with it. They have put up with it because they've been made afraid to such an extent. They've been terrorized to such a degree that they're doing it. They're going along with it because they're so afraid, because ignorance is strength, and the system makes use of that ignorance to manipulate people. So the classic kind of ignorance is strength, don't destroy my illusionary bubble, please attitude of, oh, they'll never make that mandatory. Incrementalism and the use of psychological manipulation en masse, the nudge unit. The BBC's adding that in there, trying to do its usual kind of NLP methodology of giving you the information in such a way that you don't notice the ramifications of it because they slip it in, or they invert it, they reverse it, so it sounds like a benefit rather than a damage to you. So you go, oh yeah, well, they're looking after us. The nudge unit is going to manipulate me psychologically so that I agree to it. How fantastic is that? Oh yeah, we love that. I love being manipulated by psychological interference. That is abnormal. And that sort of brings me to the other point in the subtitle, the new abnormal. Last week I was trying to explain a concept of the long-term agendas that have been playing out for a century, have been trying to lead us towards a certain kind of globalized union or order, a one world system, a new world order. Those in control, or who like to think of themselves as in control, have learned to rely on and make use of fear as their main weapon. That is the majority of what they do. They rely on the use of fear to manipulate people and persuade them to go along with what they're suggesting. Closely behind that is the financial incentive. But often the financial incentive is based on a fear of lack. They make people feel like, oh, well, how can I earn a living so that I can pay my bills and buy food for my family? Or, if I'm under lockdown, I'll lose my job, and then how am I going to survive? And that's still fear, but carried by the vehicle of financial threat. So over the centuries, they've been perfecting that manipulation by the use of fear. And from that, they persuaded people to come to a point where, from the foundation of fear, because they're so scared of dying, it's not exactly something new. They're so scared of dying, they're so scared of loss, they're so scared of lack, of losing all the privileges and conveniences and comforts and shiny things that make the modern world so fantastic, that they will willingly participate in the abnormal. And not only that, they will reprogram themselves to see the abnormal as normal. I think it was Voltaire that said that those that can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And that describes that system perfectly. By manipulating people's fear, they create an ignorance is strength bubble that means people will literally carry out an abnormal activity or lifestyle attitude but consider it perfectly normal. Last week I was talking about that one world enemy, which was a principle, an idea, a methodology that they were trying to utilize to persuade, to nudge the global populations to agree to joining together in a singular world order under a singular governmental federalized control system. Several decades ago, that emanated as the United Nations after the Second World War. And I've got to be careful and not digressing, because there's so many data points along here, and some of them are massive unto themselves. So, spend your own time looking into stuff. The Second World War was not a natural and organic event. And part of the result after the Second World War was a large federal unionization of some of the biggest nations on the planet at the time. So you had NATO basically start to develop, and the United Nations and stuff like that. And most of these things were enabled, fueled, and propagated by smaller and smaller little groups like the Club of Rome and the League of Nations. And, there's a list of stuff to do, a list of data sets that you could look at about all this stuff, or data points, I should say. But that use of a singular threat had been repeated and gradually increased as the world has slowly globalized, and the network has been spread around the world such that its interdependence is now so foundational to the way most societies operate. When you cause an interruption in one part of that chain, that network chain, it creates devastation in the later parts of the chain. So as we're discovering, after the interruption in the production chain from other countries for goods that get shipped here, we're now experiencing lack in areas of goods that were normally available. Some of that is potentially deliberately engineered to be that way, as in it's been part of this situation that they wanted to create that kind of extra stress on the population. So the reality that there is a lot, I think I said it kind of sarcastically last week, there's a whole load of chocolate Easter eggs sat in warehouses. They're not going to not distribute them. They're there waiting to be sold, waiting to be consumed. So whether there has been deliberate interference in the general supply chain so that it creates further stress on the population, puts them in more anxiety, stress creates a biological response, your immune system goes down, you're more susceptible to illnesses, and what is it they're doing at the moment? Playing on a pandemic. So all the extra stress they can put on you serves their purpose. But having that singular world enemy creates a unifying effect and brings people together under threat, under fear, but still they're using that fear whip to gather people together to agree to a new order, a new system, and that new system is abnormal to what you used to consider normal. I know recently some people have been referring to the Mayan prophecies again, and how this current situation is very similar to 9/11. It's major world-changing events happening, which is true. And in the Ethiopian calendar, it is 2012 now. So, there's a lot of consideration to put into the possibilities with those calendrical dates and cycles of time and stuff like that. But it suits their purpose to have that globalizing effect happening at the moment, and that complete inversion of the way you used to live. And that is what the Mayan prophecies were really all about. The Mayan prophecies, even that is a kind of like, convenient phrase, because there is no such thing as the actual Mayan prophecies. But there is a group of predictions or prophecies that have been put together based around that date and the Mayan calendar system, etc., But the Mayans themselves, what they actually said in their codex, etc., they didn't say the world was going to end. They didn't say it would be Armageddon and the destruction of the world and the end of the universe and the end of everything. No, the way they describe it matches their cultural belief in that cyclical process of time. Maybe I shouldn't say cultural belief. I think there's a lot of science to it. They could see cycles within the systems of reality, within the solar system, within the galactic system, etc. And what they talked about was at certain points, there would be major events that would just reset everything. The way you used to live would end is a rough translation of one of the main prophecies that's usually referred to. The way you used to live would end and you would begin a new paradigm. So what they were talking about is when one of those major cycles, a Bacton, which is something, I remember details correctly, 256,000 years. I'm not sure if I'm remembering it exactly, but you can look into the details yourself. Yeah, a major cycle ends and you begin a new major cycle, a great year, as it was called in other cultures. And that celebration of the cycle of the great year often came along with major changes in the way we live, the way we interact with each other, the way we interact with this reality. You know, modern technology has brought us to a radically different way of living than people who used to live 1,000 years ago. And in the same way now, we're going through another similar change of age. And that's why I say, giving some consideration to, well, the Ethiopian calendar dates back a lot further than the Gregorian calendar and is based on dates that correspond in many ways. So them talking about it being 2012 now, and the Mayan predictions of major changes at the end of the great year, at the end of the Bacton. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening at the moment. And the singular world enemy acts as a really good anvil for them to beat the hammer against to get us into a shape that they want. You know, I'm using the usual they label. So incrementally, they are introducing this principle of a two-tier societal system. Really, it's three, because you've got the everybody, then you've got those who operate in the middle that we could call enforcers or bureaucrats or essential workers, because they're the ones that actually still do jobs to make society function. And then you have those that think they sit on the top, that think they control everything. The pharaohs, that was how it used to work. There'd be the pharaohs, there'd be the sort of landed gentry aristocracy who claim ownership of most of stuff under the authority of the ruler. And they're the ones that, in effect, have jobs where they tell people what to do. And then there'd be everybody else, the peasantry, the serfs, the slaves included, because they were just paid in a different way. They were paid with food and water. Have you been to your shop lately? Have you been able to get any bread? Yeah. Notice how flour is sort of becoming a bit more difficult to get hold of. Initially, it was pasta, because that's a processed good, which obviously the slowing down of the provision in the global chain of the base product flour hit those pasta producers. So eventually the pasta producers ran out of stock and they've not been able to make more stock because there's not enough of a supply of flour coming in. And some of that is more to do with the global weather changes than it is anything to do with the current event that we're going through. So to come back to this image, after I've shown you that article about the contact tracing app, and they can't have a license-based system. They can't have a license for people to be allowed out to work unless they've got a way to contact trace you or check you for the virus, you know, the testing kits. And this will all become a part of the infrastructure process. They will set up a system where somebody who's considered a required worker or has an excuse to try and apply for permission to be allowed out will first need to be tested, and then if they pass or fail, etc., they get the license and blah 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 blah. So they've got to have the contact tracing gap to then be able to enable the license, if that makes sense. So this image was just in my mind over the weekend while I was thinking about various things and seeing the events unfold over the weekend. And I was just thinking, this is now becoming, rather than albeit machfrei, for those who maybe don't know, because sometimes I know I'll reference stuff, because I'm older, I'll reference stuff that maybe people just don't know about, whatever. These are the gates over the entrance or exit to the Auschwitz concentration camp. I tried to find one of the oldest pictures I could, because there's other things in the images of the more recent pictures where the camp has been altered and stuff like that. I tried to get something a bit more original to the date timeline. And this is not to digress into a discussion or argument about the claims and alleged evidence about Auschwitz and the Holocaust and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. This is just about that image and the representation of the fact that behind that gate was allegedly a concentration camp where people were murdered, were executed in the long run, and was, according to a lot of the evidence, a labor camp of some kind. So in other words, it was some form of gulag where the inmates were required to do certain jobs to get their food, and supposedly, to work towards their freedom. And this is part of the deception, was that when people were taken there, they were originally told it was for their own good, for their own protection, and as long as they cooperated and worked hard, they would be made free. So that's what it says on the original wording over on the side. Work makes freedom, basically, is a rough translation. So I just got a photo editing and just scrawled on it, license. Because if we're in that concentration camp now, which arguably we are, this is the new abnormal that they're constantly trying to impress into people's minds. And the two-tier system, the contact tracing app system, is going to basically give you a license that allows you to move around in general society, to go out and do work or to go down the park and enjoy the sunshine. License makes free. License macht frei. License makes free. So that brings me to the other interesting connection about the timeline at the moment, which I know I've sort of talked about in different ways over the past nearly a year plus. Last year, I had a perception of the concept of the Phoenix being enacted, the Phoenix process being enacted. They were about to do something. They were about to try and birth something. They were trying to enact some process that would take them to the next stage. When the Phoenix comes out of the egg, they were trying to crack that egg. The sun is an egg. There's other connections to the symbology of a lot of this stuff, but the thing I wanted to point at for this week was the fact that it's Easter. If you're from the Christian denomination, then obviously you have your Christian point of view on Easter and the resurrection of Jesus and all the stories to do with this time of the year and in the sense of the story of Jesus, etc. So for those people that are the Christian denomination, this is a fairly significant time of the year. It's probably the most significant time of the year, maybe followed very closely by Christmas, but really the main point about Christianity is the concept of the resurrection, and that is in the story of Easter, the resurrection of Christ from the tomb. But for those that have looked into things a bit more deeply than just one version of this time of the year, one cultural explanation of this time of the year, the concept of this time of the year being important in that way goes back a long time before Christianity came along. Christianity co-opted much of that older knowledge. The older knowledge was more about the way the solar system worked and the way we went through these seasonal yearly cycles that were connected to the cycles that the sun goes through. And there's a longer cycle of when the sun's activity declines. And in that, we have these yearly reenactments of the resurrection of the sun, and the sun is the son in Christian theology. I know for a lot of Christians they don't like that association. They find it offensive because they think it dilutes the message of Christianity and diverts people off the true path and shit like that. And I think that's all bunkum. There is nothing that is bad about seeing the connection between those two. I'll call them stories, because the way we explain that concept of the resurrection of the sun is often presented in story form. Even in those older cultures, they didn't sit there and say, oh yeah, there's this big burny thing in the sky that we call Sol, and every however many years it does this arc across the sky that means that the years are going to be colder for the next however many. It's not scientific detail. They talk in metaphors and analogies, and they anthropomorphize the solar bodies to be gods instead, and they talk about wars between the gods. And what that knowledge is actually encoding is the movements of the solar system. In modern interpretation, it's often referred to as astrotheology. In other words, a religious concept that they're talking about the movements of the heavenly bodies, the solar system. But at the moment, it is Easter. This is the time of the resurrection of the sun, sun. We're just not too long past the spring equinox, and that's the point. It's a couple of weeks after the spring equinox, and if you didn't know, the rotation of the sun takes approximately 2 weeks. So in that 2-week period, the sun has shown us its other face. Yeah. So you've had a full face turn since the equinox. Approximately. Is it 2? Yeah, because it's approximately 3-4 weeks since the equinox. You get to Easter. But this period has been, in many cultures, in one way or another, celebrated as the return of the sun, the return of the life giver, the beginning of spring, the time of birth and renewal, the time of nature beginning its growth process, the lambing season. There's many reasons why in Christianity they refer to the Lamb of God. It's not just about being the sacrifice. There's other reasons why it's the lamb, because again, it connects to this time period of the year when we're starting to get back into the blooming of life, and you are given back again that confidence that this reality is about creation, not destruction. You get that mindset as you go into winter that everything's going to get really difficult. The days are going to get shorter. There's going to be more darkness, more danger, more fear, more lack of food, more lack of do more quicker. And now you've gone through that, you've survived the darkness of winter, and now you can come back out the cave and the world is springing into life again, and there's new birth happening all around you. So it is a celebration of the beginning of the year. Again, in older cultures, now was the time of the new year, not just after Christmas. That was a malformation of the calendar system and theological diktats and whatever else, but now was the beginning of the year. So it is now at this time And this is part of the reason why I chose BBC to show you that article. On Easter Sunday morning on the BBC, they invited Mr. Beelzebub Gates to come and talk and tell us all about how the new world is going to be and what your new world order is going to look like. And he was talking primarily about, we need the vaccines. I and other health experts have decided that you all need a vaccine. And it just so happens that I own a company that makes vaccines. If you watch that little, it's not exactly an interview. The BBC repeater just feeds him a few lines and allows him to speak. It was basically Gates' opportunity to make pronouncements on the BBC on Easter Sunday morning. That's not exactly prime time, but it's fairly prime time for the BBC content. And they allow him to just say his thing. And he makes these little pronouncements and talks about how we need vaccines and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to show any of it. I'm not going to pick it apart because I'd end up spending multiple hours just ranting at it because it's somewhat uncomfortable to watch it without shouting at the screen. Is the only way I can describe that effect. He's constantly smirking, almost giggling, what is commonly referred to as duping delight. He's just all over his face. I and other health experts. When has he been a health expert? What qualifications has he got? Anything to do with the health of anybody, let alone himself? And his mannerisms and the ways, he's excited, he's giggly, he's like a young schoolboy just out in the park having fun. Hey, we're going to get you, we're going to get you. It's disgusting. If, maybe, I'll just put that in as like a caveat. If you've got a similar perception to myself and you can see this for what it is, certainly what I think it is, that's a separate argument, isn't it? Oh no, he was just telling people what they need to know. Reference what I was saying earlier about ignorance is strength. So he makes these little pronouncements on Easter Sunday morning. And it didn't take me long to start considering, hang on, Easter Sunday morning, you've got this twat sort of giving it this proclamation crap about how the world is now going to be. What's the main thing about Easter? It's the return of the sun. Have we been through an eclipse? What's been happening over the winter period with all this coronavirus scare, the pandemic, the pandemocracy, the birthing of the pandemocracy from that egg that they have been boiling and boiling and heating and heating. They call it kettling for a reason, folks, and kettling doesn't just happen in physical on the street when you've been surrounded by police. They do it psychologically through the media as well. They're birthing that egg, and what comes out of that egg? Bill Gates' face on the BBC talking about how the new world is going to be, making like a proclamation, almost as if he's like the pharaoh of the world. What? Hang on a minute. He's some dweeb that stole somebody else's computer code and allegedly made lots of money out of it. There's questions about where his money generates from. But how is it that he's given this kind of position and a lot of the population is looking at him as if he's some kind of expert, and he himself is directly lying by referring to himself as a health expert and claiming that, how did they word it? We didn't prepare, we didn't practice, even though there's readily available evidence of Event 201, which I know I've talked about recently. We've talked about a few times in the last few shows. So he directly lies on the BBC to the general viewing public about not being prepared for all this. And he's almost smirking and giggling and laughing about, oh yeah, you're all going to have vaccines, and then we can have licenses for people to go back to work, and we can begin slowly releasing the lockdown and letting you out. License macht frei. License makes you free. You are under the gulag of the new pharaoh of the New World Order, Bill Gates. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it might sound a bit esoteric and a stretch connecting those things, but I find it no coincidence that the BBC invite him along on Easter Sunday morning to make a proclamation like that. It wasn't an interview, it wasn't a debate, it wasn't a discussion between multiple experts about the validity of their claims and the evidence they've got. No, it was just Bill Gates gets to talk for 15 minutes about the way you are going to now live. And how many people are looking at that and thinking, what the fuck is this? I know I've seen people saying that on certain platforms there's been a lot of kickback and pushback against him himself and what he's saying and what was on the BBC, etc. And that, in a way, brings me to one of my other points and the other bit that's in the subtitle this week. It could have gone either way. It could have gone either way. Yeah, Bojo happened to be released from the hospital. Again, Easter weekend, the resurrection of the sun, the return of the sun. They are our new emperors. Look at them and then look at the old portraits of the old Roman emperors. And you see a bit of similarity. You know, he's Bojo Nero. So got the same kind of sort of fat face, you know, round face with the silly hair, a little bit like a corona, a halo around the hair, the golden child hair. Return of the sun. It could have gone either way, folks. He was ill. He might have died, but he lived. Funny that, isn't it? It's sort of, isn't that a bit like everything in life? You know, it's like you could have lived, you could have died. Well, it could have gone either way. It could be day, it could be night. It could have gone either way. You know, reality is based on a duality. The normal thumbnail that I use every week is partly to get that point across. You know, there's the individual, the guy who's in the circle with his arms folded, who's sort of resisting the conformity of the collective. There's the individual and the collective, the I and the we. And there is that dualistic element to almost everything in reality, almost everything. Certainly at the base foundation of how reality works, there is required that dualism. Subjective, objective, etc., etc. It goes on and on. So Bojo just, again, conveniently just happens to be out of the hospital and, survived, folks. Well, it could have gone either way. But that left me feeling with the concept of that dualism, of this situation, this time period, this Easter, this moment that the sun is being resurrected and they are trying to manipulate the effects. So they have created a metaphorical, psychological, spiritual eclipse to our reality. For a lot of people, their sun has been taken away over this winter months by the eclipse of this situation, the threat of the coronavirus. And what do you get when you have a solar eclipse? You get the corona around the sun, the crown around the sun. So we haven't had a 3-month-long eclipse of the sun in reality, but they've created this psychological, spiritual, energetic manipulation, a fake, a faux eclipse to make people so afraid that they think it's the end of the world, that there is no return of the sun. And now, as long as you go along with what they're suggesting, they'll allow that eclipse to move on and they'll let your sun return. And they'll give you these seeds of hope. Oh, Bojo's out of hospital, folks. He survived. Isn't it great? He's going to be back on the job again. Oh, wonderful. The sun has returned. Bill Gates, the new pharaoh appearing on mainstream television telling us all that, well, everything will be great. We'll begin to allow you back out again as long as you do this, as long as you take this mark, and then you'll be allowed to go about and freely trade. Say the word free loosely, because now freedom requires a license. Are you licensed to be free? And although I've got to mention this at this point, although it's a little bit silly, but it shows the extent that they are trying to push the envelope with how well they can manipulate certain demographics of the populace. And they're just trying silly things just to see if they can get away with this kind of stuff. But in one newspaper, it was reported that they're considering whether farts can spread the coronavirus. So if they carry on with that and they claim some kind of scientific evidence that your flatulence can pose a viral threat to others around you, then for however long, how many years I've been making the joke of like, soon you'll be fined for farting, you'll be fined for flatulence. If they're going to say that the virus could spread through your flatulence, then yeah, you'll be fined because you'll be considered a threat to the public, or you'll be quarantined. And that's what I mean about how they are trying to push as much as they can. I think they've taken the level of the physical control that they've imposed on people pretty much as far as they can. They're teetering on the edge of pushing too hard, and they've learned from their data collection. It's part of why they want everybody to do their little quarantine vlogs and to post on Twitter about how they feel today and how pissed off they are with the lockdown. And they're monitoring all that data so they know just how far to push without you being broken, without the public's mood snapping and them suddenly starting to rebel. So they're pushing it. That nudge unit again. Reference there, the blatant admission that the nudge unit is being used to influence the public to voluntarily agree to this system, their own incarceration and a two-tier society based on who has a license or not. So yeah, a bit of silliness, but this is them. Well, really come back to the main point I wanted to make. For most of my life, I've put up with and learned to deal with and developed a thick skin to people calling me a bit weird, a bit crazy, a tinfoil hatter, a conspiracy theorist. You know, the list of derogatory names is very long, and they all basically come from the same points, that kind of ad hominem principle of, I can't deal with what you just said to me, so instead I'm just going to call you crazy. I'll just call you weird or whatever. It's just a self-defense mechanism that we all do to a certain degree. Maybe I shouldn't say we all. I'm sure there's some people out there that are truly wonderful people that don't suffer from that kind of fallibility. But I think it's fairly true to say that vast majority of us do it to one degree or another. And it reflects the fear of the loss of your own reality and that process of bereavement when you realize something, and I mean realize it for yourself, which means you then get to that stage of acceptance, because it's not somebody else forcing you to agree, because that is not true, acknowledgement or acceptance. You have to know this for yourself. That's gnosis. So realizing something for yourself gets you that first step into acceptance. And when you do, you go through that bereavement process of realizing that what you used to believe in, whatever that illusion was that was one of the bricks in the wall of your reality, has just fallen away, and moving out in the lotus to a new understanding, a new comprehension is a better word to say rather than understanding. But you move through those bereavement processes. So for many people, the ignorance is strength principle is all based on a fear of loss of the reality that they've come to know. The world that they know, the world that they believe is the reality of the world around them. And a lot of what's been going on for the past few years, and certainly this event in particular, is an opportunity for many people to break through that denial barrier of believing that the authorities that think they are, those that think they are in control, like Beelzebub Gates making his proclamations, are mostly illusory, I should say, is a bit of more better grammar. But most of what the world presents itself to us as, the fake reality that is given to us by the media, by the education system, by the system of authorities that indoctrinate us all to have a certain perception and a certain way of thinking about what reality is and how the world works, goes through changes, and occasionally there are these major changes that occur cyclically that cause big things to change in the world. Really radical stuff starts happening, and we're experiencing one of them now. So this time period is a time when, for those that want to impose that system of control, for those that are so feared, so afraid of losing the physicality of this reality because they are fixated on the materialistic principle alone, that they need to impose control so that they can feel safe and secure, that they're not going to lose that physical reality that they want so much. They want to impose upon us a system of control that makes them feel like they've got that risk of independence curtailed, and we're all obedient servants, just like worker ants building the mound for the greater good, for the collective will, which is not really collective will if it all comes from a singular monarch or dictator. It's not exactly collective then, is it? But that's that normalizing of the abnormal. There's many things that have happened over the last decade plus where if you'd taken a snapshot of those things and you'd gone back like 50 years and you showed it to people and you said, do you think this would happen? And they'd go, no, they'd never do that. They'd never get away with that. They'd never be able to make that legal. They'd never make that mandatory. The people would be up in arms. But lo and behold, here we are. And now that time compression can be even, compressed further. You can take the events that are happening this week and go back a year and show it to most people, and they go, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. That's never going to happen. And yet here we are. What in the recent past would have been considered abnormal is now being defended by the ignorant as normal. So for all these years that people have referred to me as abnormal, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist, blah, 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 I sat here thinking, well, the shoe's on the other foot now, mate, because you're willfully defending this situation, not only perpetuating, but getting worse, because you are acquiescing to this dystopian surveillance state, which is just another way of saying police state, because where does the surveillance go to? What are they surveilling for? It's a bit soft language to say surveillance state, because where does the data from the surveillance go to? It goes to the judiciary system, which includes the military and the police. The police are basically just the civilian military. And in recent years, that's been made more obvious to people as they've got now their own tanks, their own drones, their own machine guns. They are the civilian military. They are the military for controlling the civilian population. All that surveillance goes into that system. So therefore, it's the police state. Saying surveillance state is just a soft language to hide that reality. a large part of the population, still at the moment, the majority of the population is so afraid of what they've lost already, the fact that they've lost already, for example, just being able to go out and about whenever they choose and buy what they want from the shops and not being restricted to only buying certain things or a number of certain items, rationing, that they're willing to agree to and acquiesce to what would have been considered abnormal not so long ago. Double plus good, as Orwell put it. This is the ignorance is strength, double plus good society that we are now merging into, birthing into. The beginning of that fear-dominated society where people are just so afraid of letting go of something that is a chunk of illusion that no longer serves them in any way whatsoever. It certainly doesn't make them healthy and whole. It makes them sick and reliant and blah, 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 subject, etc. They're struggling to do that. They're struggling to cope with that. But that brings me to that final point, the question of who wrote your future? It's a little bit of a cliche, but it's often quoted, the winners write history. They write history, but they also write the future. It's Marcus Aurelius, I think, who said, quotes, what we do today echoes through history. Echoes through destiny. I can't remember exactly the wording of it, so I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But what we do today affects the world tomorrow. History has an effect on where the future is going. Who wrote your future? Was it Bill Gates? Bill Gates wrote that idea, of, we get everyone vaccinated and then we can have a licensing system where if they ain't got the vaccine, they're not allowed out their cubicle. They have to stay in their cubicle and we'll post donuts through the letterbox. They can stay in there. We'll just show them adverts on their TV screen, on their telly screen, as Orwell called it. We'll make sure we keep an eye on them, keep them locked in their cubicle so we can watch what they're doing. We can study them like mice, like rats in a lab. There's other sort of reference points you could continue on from that, like looking into, and this is referring as well to what I was trying to describe last week and a little bit this week, that kind of concept of the one world enemy and the use of that fear of that threat, that singular threat, to cause the globe to work together, as Kissinger and many others have sort of talked about over the years. But you could look into Werner von Braun and his description of how they would use different phases, different waves of threat. And the last one, we've had a decade plus of 2 decades really, of the terrorist threat, which was, I think, stage 3 in his description. There was 5 stages, I think, altogether, which is interesting as well because of the 5th age and all that kind of stuff. But the 4th stage was the threat from outer space. And that's been a major point that's been going on the last year, 2 years, and certainly this year. The announcement of Space Force, the beginnings of the Elon Musk world coverage 5G satellite system, they've been starting to go up. There's been various asteroids and comets that have been supposedly coming close to us. There's been a lot of stuff going on in near Earth orbit and the lower atmosphere and space, as they call it. This is the beginnings of that next stage where they're going to transfer from the threat of terrorists at home to the threat of something outside of ourselves, beyond mankind. And as I was trying to describe before, the threat of a virus is the same kind of thing because it affects all of us. It's universal. It affects all people. So it doesn't matter about national borders and arguments over trade or any shit like that. A viral threat is a threat to all of us, and it's invisible to the majority of people, to the general populace. So it makes a really good boogeyman, a really good phantom menace to lurk and frighten people with. You don't do as we demand, then the virus is going to come and get you in the middle of the night. Ooh. It's that kind of, I know it's silly and it's infantile, but that's the lower level of thinking that they rely on prodding. They feed into that lower cortex drive that motivates all of us to some degree or another in our lives. But yeah, Werner von Braun and the threat from space, and also you could look at the document that describes the lockstep principle. I've heard a few people mention this. I haven't grabbed the document itself yet to sit and read through it, but I've listened to and I've watched a few people sort of showing the document, showing the different points that they lay out in that method described as lockstep, and how it almost matches identically to what's happening at the moment. And that document was written quite a few years ago, a decade ago, I think. So I'll leave it at that point, at that question. Who wrote your future? There's people out there like Bill Gates, like Kissinger, like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, etc., that like to think that they are writing your future. And the more we just go along with what they dictate, the more correct they are. The winners don't just write history. The winners try to write the future as well. It could go either way. You're at a choice point again now. This major event that's happening is an opportunity for many people to start realizing a lot of the bullshit that is portrayed as so-called reality in this world and how the world works. Stop being naive. The point I was trying to make last week when I was saying this is the new normal, the old world is gone, grieve it if you want to, but move on. You can't go back to the way it used to be. I wasn't trying to reiterate what some of they themselves have been saying in the media. That, you got to get used to the new normal. I was trying to make a point that reality that you thought existed never really existed anyway. What you're grieving is an illusion. Get over that. That's it. Get over that reality that what you've lost was an illusion in the first place anyway. We all get conned by this system to one degree or another. Hopefully, the more and more people will start to realize that big con trick, because these kind of major events get pushed to such an extreme, they become so ridiculous in the level that they try to present themselves, the way they try to push the envelope, take controls that they have no right or authority or claim to be able to take, etc., etc. They really sort of play their cards on the table. That's an opportunity to see it for what it is. People like Bill Gates, he's not the only one. It's not all about him. He's just another face on the front of a bureaucratic machine, a long and very old system of control. So don't think just by attacking him you'll deal with the problem. That wouldn't solve the problem. The same as burning down 5G towers will not solve the problem of 5G. See that for what it is and start considering how you want to live in the future. You want to go along with what they've written for you? Do you want to just accept the fate that they've decided for you? Did you give them that right to make that choice for you? We're in a situation where it could go either way, folks. You got to start choosing. You got to start thinking about it. Don't just rely on whatever authority is supposedly in front of you, like Bill Gates on the BBC saying, this is the way it's going to be. Just at the end, add the usual kind of caveat of, I'm not trying to suggest that there is no illness. I'm not trying to say that people aren't being affected, that they're not ill and not dying. I'm not trying to make glib platitudes about how, you know, oh, just knuckle down and get on with it, folks. We're all in it together. No, this is about getting past the fear that the system relies on. That's their biggest weapon. If you can learn to weather that fear and work through it, develop the courage to work through the fear, then you'll start to see behind that curtain of fear is just a bunch of little twatty dweebs like Bill Gates that are sitting there going, oh, I'm clever, I am. I'm cleverer than you, so therefore I'll decide what your fate is because you're too ignorant to figure it out. So, fuck you, Bill. Anyway, yeah, enough me rambling.
Well said, Cookie. Well said.
Thanks for listening.
Yes, listen to it all. Nudge, 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 nudge.
I'm just seeing in the chat, hello, Lost Horizon, Debbie, just say no. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no consent, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this thing about, you know, I was thinking, no, go and wash your hands for 5 hours and do absolutely nothing this Easter and beyond, and remain indoors and rat on your neighbours for being traitors to this country, for not caring about the daily death count, which has been happening every day forever on the planet.
Can I just ask a question about the washing your hands thing? I was thinking about it last week while I was washing my hands, oddly enough, yeah. But I was thinking, what about the soap? Do you have to wash the soap? How is, you know, is there something about soap that means that the virus can't live on it? Because all I was thinking is, like, you know, if you got the virus on your hands and then you rub in the soap, don't you leave the virus on the soap? And what happens then? You know, do you have to wash the soap?
Well, it's this Nazi press attitude I've seen as well come out. I mean, we've known the press and the mainstream. Anyway, this is what I do on a Wednesday with Reality Chat. You know, just point out the bullshit of it all, basically. And this has got, you know, you're seeing it now really revealing itself for what it is. You know, even mainstream presenters who say anything, as we saw today in the UK, a mainstream presenter actually speaking out a little bit, actually saying, you know, people need to think a bit more. That Eamon Holmes, I think his name is, that guy, and he has interviewed David Icke a few times, and he does, you know, again, it's this way that the press and the narrative has gone. It's just anyone who says anything against it. There's no other scientists given a platform. There's no other people, doctors, like you say, Bill Gates. Well, where's his medical qualifications? You know, it's just, you know, rich people, billionaires being given license to dictate what happens on this planet, it seems. And the people who are all supporting it all are in the, you know, in the hands, follow the money. You know, they're all being paid. If you link back to all the people who are supporting this and say this is the right thing, anyone speaking out it is wrong. Well, it's only because the mainstream media is such a powerful thing now. You know, I've said it for years. You know, we need to, you know, what's the alternative? Well, you create your own intranets or whatever, but this thing has got such a hold on everybody, it seems, especially when this is going on. It's doing what it likes now. And, you know, anyone speaking out, it's like living in Eastern Germany or somewhere, you know, back in those days, like you say, the gulag, or speaking out, ratting on your neighbors if they're not social distancing enough or whatever it is, or going out too often. And anyone speaking out or saying anything against that, the mainstream are there immediately to shut anybody down. So, but then everyone's under lockdown, even the journalists, even the guys writing the shit that they're writing in the papers, you know, can they not see what's actually going on here? But that's such a powerful instrument that they use against us and have done for a while. You know, it is the TV, isn't it, or the screen, or now the internet. And they've got, you know, everybody sort of singing off, you know, the same tune as the fake news stuff. And, you know, they're finding, you know, like I say, I've been out myself and told you, you know, someone was having a go at me for not social distancing enough, just round the corner from where I live, for fuck's sake. So
you didn't fart at him, did you?
No. So just this is what we got now. And you've got people like, I did want to mention as well, Brian Rose from London Real. He did the interview with David Icke, didn't he, a couple of weeks ago? He's done 2 actually with him, and his channels have all been, you know, attacked, or he's been reported to Ofcom, and he's lost his other accounts and this sorts of thing. And he's, you know, just another person who's thought he was doing the right things with his channel. He was giving everybody a voice and freedom of speech and all that stuff, which we've talked about since the start of all the shows we've done back in the day. And this always goes back to even before that, when they made the big attack on freedom of speech, which was 9/11 back in 2001. That's when it really started to hammer home, 19 years ago about freedom of speech and stuff like that, shutting down people who just have an opinion and whatever. And that's when it started to build and build and build to what we have now, which is really just, one-sided, mainstream, that's it. And people are following this and they're tuning into their government and their daily dose of government advice every day. Everybody's, not me. I switched this off ages ago, really. I don't want to see this shit anymore, but yeah.
It's like the hour of hate. Here's your 10-minute message from the government, and then you can carry on hating. What was his name? Goldstein, I think, the character in the book.
That's it, the 2 minutes of hate. We're meant to be the traitors. These people are the fucking traitors. What's it going to take, man? They've sat there and they let them convince you that 2 aluminium planes took down 3 skyscrapers made of reinforced concrete and steel. They sat there as MP after MP in Westminster have fucked as many kids as the Vatican have done. You've sat there and you've let them shoot up Waynes and schools to fucking disarm the Americans. You've sat there as they've slaughtered thousands of people in the Middle East over a pack of lies. Are you just going to sit there until your arse grows roots out of your coffin? Or are you going to get off your fucking knees and stop these cunts turning this planet into one big prison system? You know what I mean? You want to talk about traitors? You people are the traitors that are out there clapping at 7 o'clock at night like a bunch of performing seals, keeping up toilet rolls and taking selfies of yourselves. You want to get a grip of yourselves.
Yeah, spot on, right?
Yeah.
That's the ignorance is strength crowd. Yeah, they bought hook, line and sinker, and they want to be good little citizens and do what they're told to do.
What's it going to take? What is it going to take? You're under house arrest now. Are you starting to believe the things that we're saying? I know there's a lot of people in the room that were singing to the choir, but this is for the people that are in the corner of your living room going, what you're listening to them for? You people are wanting to wake up, man.
Yeah. I just highlighted in that article, I still had the article open about Eamon Holmes, and when you mentioned it, and I just highlighted in there the one bit, and this is a good example of how the BBC manipulates news, tries to spin it. Yeah, what Eamon Holmes actually said was, quote, "What I don't accept is mainstream media immediately slapping that down as not true when they don't know it's not true. It's very easy to say it's not true because it suits the state narrative. At no point did, just let me describe this. At no point did he say 5G causes coronavirus, which is what the BBC is trying to claim in this article. And as we discussed, I think last week on Wednesday on Reality Chat, at the moment they're pushing in the media this narrative that the crazy conspiracy theorists online are peddling this dangerous idea that 5G is giving people coronavirus. And there's a perfect example of how BBC, the British Brainwashing Corporation, is trying to spin that and say, oh, Eamon Holmes even said it. He said, no, he fucking didn't. All he said is that you cannot prove it's not. So therefore you shouldn't put out this attitude that you know that it doesn't when you can't prove that.
Yeah.
What's that? Ridicule without investigation is the ultimate ignorance.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You said who wrote your future, Cookie. I was going to think, write your own future. You write your own, and it's your destiny. Fulfill your own destinies, and all that stuff. If you need that, like I say, we've become reliant, or lots have become reliant on that, system, the handouts and all that thing. But you can build a gradual way out of it. If you want to be completely independent from, and lots of people have, they've proved that. Lots of people have done it. But the way that they've now are pulling in the fences really quickly and tightly, stopping people from even going to second homes and things of this nature. Those who thought they were going to go off and, go to their wherever it was to escape all the madness have found themselves stuck where they are and can't leave. So, this is a realization, like you said, Days. I mean, people, this is the time, this will wake up. People woke up in 9/11, but this will wake up, it woke up millions in 9/11. This will wake up hundreds of millions. That's the difference. And it's like a birthing process you go through, realization that, these this isn't what you thought it was. Like you were saying, Cookie, that's gone now. That was an illusion. That's a joke. They were taking the piss out of us. We didn't see it, and now we can see it. and those who are sensible, balanced, have done this work and look at it can, you know, right across the globe, you know, there's millions of us. That's why they panicked and have pulled off the Bill Gates phenomenon, you know, Dr. Evil and all the rest of it. You know, they've done this, and I think it's been, you know, they know where, you know, we may not, you know, say everything we say online or whatever, but you know, or lots of people don't come online and say anything, but they know there's a undercurrent there of people who would know what's going on. And the paedophile stuff really did shake their boots, I think, you know, with the Prince Andrew and the royals, and I think everything like that has been slowly coming out, and you know, they've, you know, this is their sort of call, if you like, and it backfires. You know, it might not seem good at the moment for a lot of people, you know, but it will backfire. It will, you know, I think they've shot themselves in the foot with this whole affair, and it reveals it for what it is. Like you say, pull the curtain back, and what have you got? You know, you thought you had this life, you thought you had this wonderful matrix kind of existence, and everything was flowing nice, and suddenly someone has come along and just whipped the carpet from under your feet.
I see a lot of people like comfort in lies. You know what I mean? They're content with comfort in lies. You know?
I think as well.
Look at what it leads to.
I think it's worth considering whether a lot of their actions, like you're saying, Pete, have been done deliberately to antagonise. Because it does seem very much like what Chip Seas has said. Yeah, they want an uprising. I know we talked about this kind of thing before over the years, and there's been other incidents where we tried to describe the same concept of, it seems like they're deliberately prodding the members of the public to try and get them to react, try and get them to rebel, basically. They want people in the streets being riotous. Yeah, or like what's been happening recently, they want people burning down the 5G towers, because that then serves their purpose of feeding the narrative that they feed via the media to most of the public, saying, look at these crazy people, they need to be curtailed, they need to be shut down, they need to be controlled, they need to be put in a camp because they've got the virus. You know, things like that. It's like they are deliberately trying to get people to react. They put the pressure on so much, like I was trying to describe earlier, you know, the restrictions that we're under make no logical sense if we take their claims as legitimate as the premise of saying there is this virus and it's spreading through the public and we need to try and curtail its spread. What they've done doesn't make any logical sense. We've got police officers walking around with no masks on, telling other people to go home because they've got no mask on. Abnormal. They're making the abnormal into the normal, and people are accepting it. And that seems to be, are they doing this just to prod and try and get us to react like that?
I've got the link in our chat, Cookie. I don't know if you can see it. It's the
ID 2020. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me just mention this one then I'll show the ID one. I pulled up Jeff C's video on this, but you can find, you know, the coverage of this guy. He's on the mainstream media. He's been shown on mainstream American media anyway. Dr. Scott Jensen, who points out, who, you know, raises the concern about how the what they put down on the death certificate is being deliberately influenced, and he doesn't directly say deliberately manipulated, but he implies it in the way he describes the situation, where now the medical professionals like himself are under pressure from the WHO, from the who writes your future, to put down coronavirus on the cause of death for the death certificate. Yeah, so experts that
happening everywhere. Each country,
the experts that are willing to speak out about it, like him, are demonstrating a reality of how there is this deliberate attempt to, in one way of describing it, pad the numbers. You know, and I don't think that's not, how can I say, that's not strong enough wording to describe what is happening. They're not trying to just pad the numbers. They are outright manipulating the numbers to give the results they want. Most of what we've heard, I think, from what I've been watching the news media for the last several months with this, What they are doing is telling us the usual death rate from the flu, from influenza, because, and I'm sure a lot of people are fairly knowledgeable on some of these points now because of how much information is out there. Influenza is the coronavirus. The coronavirus is not just one singular thing, it's a family of viruses. There are various mutations of the coronavirus tree. Yeah, COVID-19, this one that is supposedly doing the rounds now, is the one that they're claiming is causing all this danger, the pandemic, etc. But what they're telling us in the reports, when you compare the death rate for this year to the death rate from last year, it's pretty much identical. Almost identical. There's a slight numerical difference. Yeah. So what they're telling us when they say so and so died of coronavirus, so you're saying he died of the flu, because influenza is coronavirus. So if you say died of coronavirus, you just said died of the flu. Yeah. It's only occasionally that they specifically say COVID-19. The majority of what's being reported, and in particular, that number, that death count that they like to stick in everyone's face daily, every day, the death count today is, that's coronavirus, and that is influenza.
You're not even needing a post-mortem now in Scotland if it's suspected that you had coronavirus.
Yeah, I think it says that on the WHO's instructions that they've sent out to everyone. Yeah, how to write the death certificates. It says even if you suspect that they have it, then you should put that on the death certificate. That's outright fraud. That's fraud.
If they're within our body, then if they're in our body at a cellular level, when they act as a soap or solvent to try and get rid of fucking like bacterial problems that you've got and atmospheric conditions, then when they test you for it, you're going to have it. You know what I mean? It's simple. People need to wake up, man.
That's even without getting into the question of what is in the test kit, who made the test kit, how are the results determined, etc. There's various points in that process where influence or even incompetence, that's been bubbling up again recently as well. The claims of incompetence, and that's the cloak of the psychopath. He said, we didn't mean for that to happen. We're so sorry that 1 million of you died. We just made a mistake. Yeah. The incompetence I'm sick and tired of hearing the claim of incompetence. How many hundreds of years do we have to accept? It was just because government's incompetent. Well, if they're incompetent, why the fuck are they in power in the first place? The whole idea of that governance bureaucratic system is meant to be that people who know how to do the job do that job so that they provide that service for us. It's not that they do it incompetently and then we all go, never mind. No, fuck that shit.
It's just bumbling Boris with his stupid hairdo, and that's how easy they were fooled anyway into thinking there was something wrong with him. He just messed his hair up, took a couple of buttons off his shirt. That's all the evidence people need to think, their glorious leader has suffered a big problem in this wartime that we're going through. We need to get by him, man, and no alternative views allowed. Any alternative view is psychosis and hatred, and you're a traitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this ID thing.
ID 2020.
Aye. There's a few interesting tabs on that.
There's that one that Taz shared with us last week as well. The one from 2018, I think it was. If
you go to the About Us page on there, you can see who's all behind it, and these are the real traitors to humanity. These are the enemies of the people right here. You know what I mean? Microsoft, fucking Rockefeller Foundation, and all that. They people are behind it. That's what's coming next. You know what I mean? It's your mandatory vaccines. I don't know about you guys, man, but you get sick saying the same fucking shit every week, man.
They're trying to do it in a passive way, because if they do what China did, just you're having it. So they're trying all their best ways to do the passive approach, and that, because of the virus, and everybody is now on board with, obeying and being obedient, absolute obedience to it all. They'll be able to pull this off. They'll be able to, people will willingly go and get it. And then this is what they're assuming, of course. This is their assumptions. This is again where they will see what happens. because we're not in China. We won't put up with that. Bill Gates, I mean, we've already seen the comments Bill Gates has been getting. So we know that, and he knows and they know that ain't going to happen. And if they do try and force it, then again, where will we be in a world like China, and it will be enforced, and that will be the boot on the face of humanity forever. Who said that?
Eric Blair.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as George Orwell.
That's the one.
We're sitting watching the world's worst horror film in slow motion, so may as well get the popcorn.
Well, I did watch some good movies. I watched. I've been watching. Was it Wicker Man again? The original from 1972.
Dear God, no.
It's that one, and Idiocracy again. I had to watch that again because it's just the one I had to watch.
Welcome to Walmart. I love you.
Yeah, those the classic films. But yeah, I mean, look, it's this contact tracing app thing you talked about. The one where again, voluntary. Volunteer for this. It'll help out. And the nudge unit is worrying because these nudge. We need to be nudging them our way. They're trying to nudge you their way. We just need to nudge them back again, and it's a nudge game.
I haven't heard too much more about this national government that new leader of Labour was supposed to be going into talks over the next couple of weeks. But it's worth keeping an eye on. Are we moving into an era of governance? That's what they seem to be suggesting on this ID2020.org as well. And then to the sham of democracy, the pantomime's over.
Yeah.
The corporatocracy connection as well would. Like the first article I was showing, where it says Apple and Google are designing their own app. And I was trying to describe how that demonstrates that the corporations are powerful enough to curtail the complete monopolization of the governments. The governments, the way we're taught as we're brought up in this system, the governments are supposed to be the top authority. But those corporations are clearly demonstrating that they don't think they are. So doesn't that show you then that it is a corporatocracy where private business, corporations and government, so-called government, are one and the same thing? As Mussolini put it, fascism should rightly be called corporatocracy because it is a merger of the state and private business. I get the quote correct.
Another thing that kind of illustrated that over the last week, I think, is it the Brazil president, Jair Bolsonaro or something like that? He had tweeted about his fucking sort of alternative views on the coronavirus, and they were taken down. You know what I mean? So that illustrates that the business is on top of the government when it comes to that hierarchical pecking order. You know what I mean? Like they will decide. You know what I mean? Like Twitter are more important than the leader of our country.
Yeah. Twitter has more influence over the global population now than most other institutions. And it is just, that's why I prefer to call it Twigger, because all it does is just trigger people. That's what it's built on. Again, it's appealing to that lower level thinking. It's just prod a button, get an emotional response, prod a button.
The algorithms are designed to engender conflict on the social media platforms.
And that also engenders tribalistic responses where people band together in places or in groups where they feel they have that kind of collective connection. All of us are on the left and we think Trump's a twat, and so therefore we attack anyone that likes Trump, that kind of shit,
and
or vice versa.
The rise of the identity politics, now the intersectional warring.
Yeah.
That seems to have gone by the wayside a wee bit now that we've got real problems to fucking deal with right enough.
Yeah, there's been a few things that seem to be disappeared out of the news recently. Like we're talking about before came on air. Questions like, well, what's going on in Syria at the moment? What about Yemen? Yeah, do you remember they're still at war, an unofficial war in Yemen and Afghanistan? What's happening with that? Yeah, they brought North Korea back into the news a little bit, talking about weapon testing. But there's not really been the same level of focus. 99.9% of what's in the media, certainly what media I can access from Great Britain anyway, 99.9% is about coronavirus.
Yep.
Every day, it is just literally saturation. And if you really think that, if you got this absolute denial barrier that says, oh, that's just because it's an important event, so of course they're talking about it. On every page after page after page, hour after hour, the media is filled with coronavirus, be afraid, death count. You don't think there's any deliberate method for that, yeah?
Well, it's repetition is key to trauma-based mind control. Repetition.
Yeah.
Most of what they've been doing is relying on that mental manipulation to make people perceive the threat as being so dangerous, so deadly, so immediate. Like it's just outside their front door, so they better stay inside and wash their hands and clean everything. They made them so paranoid. Again, something that the debunkers, the naysayers have often popped up and, oh, Cookie, you're just paranoid. It's like, no, I'm not. You're a twat. Now, half the population is so paranoid that they won't even lift their heads up to see the bullshit that's being thrown at them.
You've been over that long, like, fucking stand up.
Yeah. And like you say, fear is the biggest mind virus going, isn't it? So
yeah. It's the main thing that is viral about this whole situation. Yeah, I'm not avoiding the discussion. I think I might have said this last week. Yeah? I'm not avoiding the discussion or the information, all that kind of thing, but I don't want to get stuck on the questions of whether the virus is even real in the first place, how it's spread and how dangerous it is and what's the fatality rate and stuff like that. Because I think that's a lot of the details that they're deliberately manipulating, so that as a layperson, I can't really say anything about it with any great confidence. I can speculate, but that's part of what they want us to do. Argue over those details so that we don't react to all the other shit that they're doing based on the justification of there being a pandemic.
It's just like 9/11. Like what took the towers down was a fucking this, that, a beam went, a nuke, a sub nuke, a this, that, and next thing. You know what I mean? They weren't fighting over the methods. You know what I mean? And not thinking about the societal changes which take place off the back of it.
And the economy and all the economies are gone. You know, people haven't realised that yet. You know, they're not realising it's crashed. Every single one is not going to come back the way it was. Like you say, it's going to be different. We're going to see prices go up. You know, might see what you call surplus stock, like you mentioned, the Easter egg surpluses. You know, where stocks had not sold because maybe last year they thought they'd sold out more and they got more. Who knows? But anyway, there's going to be other markets like the clothing markets, excess stock for winter clothing, summer stuff. People aren't going out buying like they were in shops. You're going to see all of this happening, and prices will eventually then go up. You know, because they'll want to, you know, get money back. You'll see cheap goods initially, and then a massive increase. So there'll be that kind of like a sort of a fool's card played. You know, people think, oh, this is good. Then, oh, it's good after the pandemic. Look, it's all dead cheap. Everyone's giving stuff away, or they're trying to get rid of stuff. But then you'll see hyperinflation maybe kick in. You'll see that go up, and you know, we've been there before in the 80s. If those who can remember it, who were old enough, the hyperinflation in the 80s under Thatcher. I think it rose to about 1.14%. I think it's 0% or 0. something percent at the moment. It went up to about 14 under her. So imagine that going from that to 14%. It could go even higher. This is the worst economic situation we've ever faced in our whole history of this system being built. You know, it hasn't collapsed like this before. It hasn't just stopped in every part of the world ever. You know, we had wars, but shops were still open. People still went out. You know, we've never had this before. So this is not going to be the same. And we're all going to have to, like you say, Cookie, readjust, get on, you know, not cry over the past, but make and move forward and educate ourselves and realize, why have we got to this? What, you know, we've been watching too much television, we've been too distracted, you know, that, and it's time to grow up. Yeah, it's time to grow up, you know, and be, you know, the people we should be on this planet, and run it the way we should run it, in a good, wholesome, holistic way. Anyway, that's my rant over.
Convenience was the drug. That's most of what, you know, they use fear as a whip, but convenience is a carrot. You know, it's a carrot that is like a drug for many people. Do you want to, you know, have the responsibility of doing something for yourself, or do you just want the convenience of whatever they offer to provide for you?
And
but it's
scarcity on the flip side, yeah, you know.
Yeah, false scarcity. Yeah, because I was going to say, for a lot of people, that kind of convenience it's got to the stage now where it's not exactly a choice anymore. Maybe 20 years ago, there was still a bit more of an option that you could say, well, actually, rather than the convenience, I'd rather do it myself. And the opportunity was there to do it yourself, or to go to other suppliers, like go to your local farmers market and stuff like that. But now we get into the stage now where a lot of those options have basically been removed in one way or another. They have curtailed your available options. Whereas before you might have said, well, actually, that looks a bit, you know, just too convenient, and I don't want to hand over my data, or I don't want to have to subscribe to be able to have access to whatever your reasoning of saying no thank you to the convenience. The problem now is when you look for an alternative way of doing it, even doing it for yourself, the option has been removed. And recently, within the last couple of weeks, that's even got to the stage of things like the retailers have been told they're not allowed to sell non-essential goods, and non-essential goods has been deemed to include things like seeds, gardening equipment. So if you're sat there thinking, well, they've removed my convenience connection of the supermarket supplying all my food requirements, so I'll start doing it for myself. I'll start growing my own food. I'll go and buy some seeds. Oh, I'm not allowed to buy seeds. Do you see what I mean? And
man, it's the centralisation of control. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like one big supermarket instead of all of these wee shops, you know. And it's even like the schools nowadays as well, man. There used to be 7 or 8 schools in my town where I came from. There's just one big factory school. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the only way. You know what I mean? Yeah. There is no alternative.
And they've sold, and I mean sold in the sense of like psychologically persuaded. They've sold the idea of certain concepts as being a way of doing things for yourself, whereas they knew full well in the first place that they already had the monopoly on it, or they were close to getting the full monopoly. So, for example, things like, again, a couple of decades ago, you could get a grant from the UK government to have solar panels fitted on your home and wired into your home electrics, so that you could reduce the pressure on the national grid. You know, so you were encouraged to participate to help the world become greener and be all nice and good and whatever. So they actually offered you money to have this done. And then over the last several years, they've now switched that. And now the grants aren't available anymore, as far as I know. But also, you are now required to be wired into the main system. So you may have thought, well, again, another trap of convenience of me having to pay a monolithic, monopolistic corporation to supply my energy. Instead, I'll produce my own energy and I'll be off the grid then, and I can be self-sufficient. You're not allowed to. You're now required to have your energy generation set up wired into the main network. Another example is things like the 3D printer revolution that never was. And I said this right from the start. What do you put in the 3D printer to print stuff out of? Exactly right. At the time when it first came out, I was looking at it from the point of view of that kind of monopolistic control. You're not freeing yourself from the system because you're still reliant on the system to get the base resource that you feed into the 3D printer. And as you yourself, Dave, brought up a couple of weeks ago, another element to that is the demonization of plastic, so that the monolithic control corporatocracy can step in and buy up all those plastic producers, because now the public hate them, so their value drops through the floor, so they can buy them up for pennies on the dollar, as they say, and then they can turn around and go, oh, 3D printer revolution, it's the new world, folks, here you go, we can provide all the plastic you need to print your own doodads. Wow, amazing. You've really freed yourself from the system, haven't you? Yeah, they've done a lot of that in the last couple of decades. They've been slowly leading us towards this point where your options are very much curtailed compared to what they were 2, 3, 4 decades ago. Well, certainly 4 or 5 decades ago, you had a hell of a lot more possibility. But it doesn't mean there are not ways that you can be getting out of this system. You know, I know I've mentioned this a couple of times in recent weeks. Check out the conscious resistance, in particular Derek Bros, because I know the conscious resistance isn't just one person. It's not just Derek. There's other people there as well. But Derek has done a lot of work on information that will help you if you want to go that kind of direction of trying to get off grid, become self-sufficient, all those kind of good things. And it's worth checking out his work if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And he's done a lot of the stuff himself. You know, he's not just talking about stuff. He's not just, you know, saying how great it would be. He's actually been out there and done a lot of these things. You know, he's still doing a lot of them, etc. So he did a little booklet a while ago, a small book called How to Opt Out of the Matrix. I can't remember the exact title of it. It's How to Opt Out of the System. Yeah, check it on their website, on the Conscious Resistance.
I think that's essentially what it's about, man. Do something, write a joke, write a song, don't know, just get your affairs in order, even, you know what I mean? Like, just don't be passive, man. They just want you to sit in your arse and watch Netflix, man.
The element of, as well, I want to reiterate, and I've said this a few times in the past, but to reiterate it now is a good point to say it. You don't have to be Gandhi to make a difference. You don't have to be totally off-grid and completely self-sufficient and doing everything for yourself to make a difference. Little things make a difference as well. Again, referencing the first article I showed and what they said about the nudge unit, and Peter, I think, said it earlier, you know, we nudge back. They try to nudge us, we nudge back. You know, like when you go into the town square in the old days and you talk about elbow room, and you want to get where you're going, so you have to get a bit of the elbow in that you have to nudge back. If they're going to nudge, you nudge back. Doesn't mean you have to be a perfection of some ideal of Neo escaping the Matrix or any of that kind of bullshit. Small things make a big difference when they're on a mass scale. So if everybody turned around and said no, they'd have to go, actually, they're not buying it. We may need to change our plans a bit. We might have to do, it will make a difference. The more NHS workers that turn around and whistle blow and say, hang on a minute, our hospital's empty, I don't believe what they're saying. It might sound like a small little thing to happen, but it all adds up. Yeah, so please don't be put off because you think, oh, I could never do that. I'm not capable of being self-sufficient. There might be lots of things for you personally that means, you know, you can't fit that ideal, but that's exactly it. It's an ideal. You know, be pragmatic. Any little thing you can do will add to make a difference. Don't be put off participating because you think you have to achieve some perfect ideal to get the job done. You don't.
No, I was just going to other quotes there from bloody Orwell, Eric Blair. In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Yeah, it's another one. That's what they do want. That's the thing, you see. They want people to. I've said this since I started speaking out back in 2011. doing those early bits, saying that that's what they want. They want to poke and prod people. They want to get you agitated, angry, frustrated. And we were going through all kinds of things even back then. You know, they've been constantly sort of building up to, you know, like get away with things, you know, like what they brought in over the years, you know, all the new sort of all the things that have like made it even harder to live, you know, like everything, students, everything, you know, all the things that were going on back then, you know, the Occupy movements, all that stuff, everything that was like people were trying to sort of push forward. There was a wave of people waking up back then in 2000 and sort of mid 2000s and onwards. And there was a big rush of people wanting to, you know, get to know things and then connect with people. And then they stepped in, and we've seen what's gone on since. You know, they've tried to create all of the other bullshit. They've given us crazy puppet leaders that, you know, we've had lies after lies of presidents. You know, I'm going back to Barack Obama and then onwards from there, say, or even Bush before him, you know, just lies and lies and lies and lies. And people can see it all. And then they give you a clown puppet president. And in the UK, we've got a clown puppet prime minister who, you know, they all look round to what do we do next, guys? What do we do next? And all that stuff. So people can see it. They saw it with the Brexit fiasco. You know, the lies, you know, the not telling the truth. Ooh, how many people got caught lying and stabbing each other in the back there? You know, people can see that. You know, have to remember, you know, people seem to just zoom into this current situation and forget about everything else. You know, it's just that it's held a lot of people into this fear mode, like we said, you know, in that panic mode, and people need to step outside of it and start looking at other doctors, other people who aren't given the platform on those mainstream sites that are becoming just the, like I say, arbiters of truth, and no questions can be asked, and that is it. Anyone stepping out of line, the newspapers are on them writing these fake stories probably about certain things and trying to agitate people to get really wound up about, say, what the police are doing, and maybe some of those stories are false. So you see how they just lie constantly anyway about what they're telling the people, and they're trying to get a reaction. And like you say, that's what I think they've been trying for, you know, quite a while. And now we're at this point where we're all locked in our homes. And one of those blueprint documents I saw about a few weeks ago, I think it was Jam Noise put it up with this German doctor. Was he a doctor? I think he was a German and saying about this blueprint from 2006 where a pandemic would, you know, cause this and cause that. And the next thing would be, you know, people getting, you know, social unrest and things like that would occur, especially with the economy going down the pan the way it has.
Funny how there's been no terrorist attacks in the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Yeah.
School shootings or
funny, no?
People shouting Allahu Akbar and stabbing people.
Yeah.
Convenient terrorists.
Just to mention this, Rachel Jones said she's been trying to get seeds, can't get seeds. She's ordered some off eBay, but obviously she's got to wait for them to be delivered. So we're sort of back to that point of even delivery drivers, warehouse workers now are essential workers if we're going to actually carry on living. Because if you only way you can get seeds is ordering them online, then you've got to wait for them to be delivered.
See, when are people going to wake up to these politicians wearing the blue shirt as if they're a working man of the people, and then the buttons undone as though they're hard working, you know what I mean? See, when that Boris Johnson was supposedly in the hospital anyway, I mean, my heart was bleeding. How many disabled and vulnerable people died or committed suicide through the disgraceful ATOS sanctions and the brutal austerity measures his party introduced and he stood by? You know what I mean?
Yeah, over 100,000.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anybody still working in essential positions should get their overtime pay and their holiday pay. They should get their student debt cancelled. They should get the protective equipment they're wanting, eligible for low interest rates loans that other government employees get. You know what I mean? They should be treated like heroes. They should be treated like the footballers and all that, you know. But these politicians, I've said it before, but maybe this is a solution. Maybe this is something we can get behind, man. People, hear me on this one, right? All politicians should be on minimum wage. See, if you want to do your job as a politician, you should be on minimum wage. Minimum wage, you should be housed in the poorest street in your constituency. See the street is run down, the piece of shit street, the worst street in your constituency. That's where you should live. You should live in the most run down house in the worst street in your constituency. You should be subject to regular lie detector tests. drug tests and PET scans to help determine psychopathy. Can we get behind that, man? Can we get a hashtag going on that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Earlier today, I was looking at just a general news output. I didn't bother tuning in for the daily announcements from Hancock and whatever this week. After seeing the stuff, the little bits like I ranted about earlier over the weekend, I thought I can't be arsed watching today's announcement. But I saw the headlines. Basically, them announcing that the lockdown will not be eased within the next week. So they've got the general populace to the stage now, tuning in nearly every day to get their daily instructions. And one of those is that you're not going to be allowed out for the next week. But on the back of that, or in the background of that detail, I can't remember which minister it was that was covering this, but they were talking about that they estimate that the UK economy will take about a 30% hit. And I thought, yeah, here we go with the number magic. You know, they're manipulating fucking numbers again. But I just thought, like, well, in one breath, you're saying that the economy is going to take this 30% hit. And then you say, and we're still not letting you out. So in other words, the 30% is going to get bigger. Even using your bullshit numbers, that was going to increase, isn't it? Because we're all still under lockdown for another week. And then if you had another week on, it's going to get bigger. And another week, it's going to get bigger. So, you know, when they've been rumouring, and again, a lot of what our parliament, our politicians have been putting out there recently is telegraphing what they will be doing. So when they're rumouring about something, that means that it's likely to happen in the near future anyway. And a lot of the rumour mongering that they've been pushing is that the lockdown will not stop until they have a vaccine, which could take up to 18 months. And then Easter Sunday morning, there's Bill Gates saying, well, I and other health experts say we need a vaccine and then we might be able to let you out.
Well, it could be long. I mean, it could be.
Thanks, Bill.
To the best of my knowledge, most vaccines take between 10 and 25 years to develop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm not some sort of fucking scientist, but that's what I felt then, you know?
But in terms of the economy, if that rumour, like I say, in their habit of telegraphing what they're going to do, if that rumour means that they will keep us under lockdown for up to a year plus, then that 30% that he said has already happened, it's going to be over 100% by the time we're done.
Well, he'd be on the BBC next Easter with an Easter egg and he'd crack it open full of vaccines for you. There you go.
Chocolate.
This is your universal basic income getting introduced, you know?
They'll have to.
Aye, but just like Cookies just pointed out there, they'll need to bring it in. And if it can live on hard surfaces for any length of time, that's your currency fucked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're going to have to get into a cashless society anyway. So you might as well just get your 1,200 a month or whatever it is, you know, and then everybody's on the same dough. Money's useless, so humanity has to redefine itself in a different way. My name's John and my toilet ain't going to work any longer when the robots are doing the job better than you anyway. So we're sleepwalking into our next stage of evolution.
Yeah, it's already happening as well, because I mean, the major supermarkets are now saying they're not taking cash. I know the one I go to isn't made the announcement walking around self-distancing in the oh, nobody is. It's a joke. I mean, it's completely impractical self-distance. It is a joke, honestly. But anyway, they announced that over the tannoy that they were no longer accepting cash payments in the store. So that's going to ripple effect across every high street. Once the ones who survive, that is the ones who are left after this, like you say, crashing everything. It's already 30%, and I think it's already predicted that was a few weeks ago, over 1 million businesses would go under, wouldn't come back, and that figure will just go up and up and up. And this economy in this country, and they've done it deliberately so, we haven't got time to go into it now, but it's based on all consumer stuff, isn't it? It's all cafe, bars, restaurants,
all
all that
consumer
type of
cycle.
Yeah, it's nothing, no industry. It's all in foreign hands. But there's nothing else that gives, like, mostly think of the millions of people who are employed in that industry. It's millions and millions and millions, and that overnight was just shut down. So, you know, we're talking about a massive number here of people who are going to be, you know, unable to find another job, because what jobs were there anyway, other than working in bars, cafes, restaurants, and those types of jobs? They were the types, like I say, they built this country on that kind of industry. And yeah, it's gone overnight.
Yeah.
And your cashless society, it's not just going to be convenient. You know, maybe thinking, oh, it's better off just get. It's going to be tied to the social credit score. You know what I mean? So bad monkey, no banana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a nudge unit again.
Nudge.
I know I ranted about this the other night, but some of the, you know, kind of debunker attitude of, oh, they'll never ban cash, they'll never get away with that, people will protest. So they don't need to outright ban it yet. They just need to apply their nudge unit to psychologically manipulate people to prefer using other methods of payment. Yeah, so things like the emphasizing the convenience and then encouraging the providers, like the big retail traders, to turn around and say, well, we're not taking cash anymore. And then eventually you'll get to a stage where there will be no cash till in a store. There'll only be methods for electronic payment.
Yeah.
And then, as Dave says, you know, that's all going to be tied to your profile registered with the government, which will be your biometric ID profile, which will include all your financial stuff as well. So they'll be able to see everything you're doing with your money. And if you do something, or just in your everyday life, you're doing something they don't like, they'll just stop your ability to transact with others.
It's another service turned into a force. I mean, like your police service into a force, and these apps, they're going to be so convenient, tracking everybody. That's going to become mandatory, as you were saying, you know.
Yeah. In some places,
convenience, and then it's mandatory.
In some places, and I don't know how much they've got away in terms of legality with this, like how much legal application they put to it, but in some places they banned bartering. So even if you look again, like I was talking about alternatives earlier and options, you know, they're trying to impose again and saying you're not even allowed to barter. Yeah, whether you accept that is another question, but they're trying to push the envelope again to get you to think that they can stop you from interacting with others and saying, hey mate, do you want to swap this? You know,
I think that was a big reason why they were saying that it originated for that wet market as well, you know, like because of small business, or I think you're saying like the bartering sort of aspect and
independent traders.
You must go to the supermarket, you know.
Yeah, the big monopolies, which will slowly be revealed to be a major part of the corporatocracy anyway. Yeah, the number of suppliers has shrunk. They've dominated the agricultural industry, so that now, I mean, recently there was reports about the dairy farmers having to throw away loads of milk because there isn't the transport there to get it to the stores. So basically they were told to just dump it. And a lot of those farms are basically subsidiaries to the big supermarkets. So the supermarkets cut that loss. They basically say, yeah, we'll take that loss, just tell them to dump it because we can't supply the transport required. Corporatocracy. Soon it will be ration portion. You go in and you hand over or you wave your thing that's got your little ration portion on. They'll go, here's your ration portion. Just as a laugh to add a bit of lightness to the mood. One of the silliness examples you're saying about going to the supermarket, but the one thing recently in the supermarkets by me, they've installed those plastic shields in front of the cashier.
Yeah. I've done the same in ours. Yeah.
So you go to pay and you put your stuff on the counter on one side of, you know, you've got the edge of the shield next to you there when you're putting your stuff on the counter, on the belt. And then it goes along the belt, and the shield is only like about 2 foot wide and is directly in front of the cashier. And then you're on the other side picking up your stuff after they've rung it up. Do they not comprehend that the air movement, if they claim the virus is spread by air, the air movement can go around the plastic shield, yeah? Because air does that. Air goes round stuff. It's fucking amazing, yeah. Air, it just moves round. So they got this shield there, and they think my breath can't go around that. And that's even before you get into questions like you're handling all the packaging of the goods and then the cashier is handling all the packages of the goods. How is this preventing transmission? It is not, full stop. These are all about manipulating your perception, making you feel like something is being done so that you go along with it. Yeah. Believe the illusion. Look, here's the plastic shield to prove the illusion. Because you can't see the air, you know, for a lot of people, it's just not registering. It's, hang on, right, the air will just go round and get to that cashier anyways.
Yeah. Madness, isn't it?
Normalizing the abnormal. At the moment, you are being requested, you are being pressured, you're being psychologically manipulated to accept a new abnormal and believe the illusion that that is normal. Stop it. Anyway, folks, that's just gone the hour, so wrap it up at that. Thanks.
Cheers,
for joining. I didn't go through the chat and say hello to everybody. Sorry, I was just too busy getting into my ranting. Thanks to everyone that's joined us in the chat. Stewie, hello. Neo Dog, hello. New Being, hello. Alan McVicker, hello. Big Al. Glad you're still singing, mate. I hope your little one's getting better. Krishna, hello. And Minty B, hello. I'm just scrolling down quick. I'll try and say hello to everyone I can see in the chat room that's visible to me at the moment. Dots, hello, Tony. Hope you're all right, mate. And Debbie's in there. Hello, Debbie. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for posting that information in. And Lopsam Tathro as well. He's posting about how soap breaks down the virus. So thanks for that. It was just a bit of silliness, but it was just, you know, you get those questions sometimes that come up. I've never found out how does it do what it does, you know, how does that work? How does soap break the virus kind of thing? Oh man, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Snajolfa. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that terribly. And James, hello, James, the chat room ninja. And Saul Bollocks, hello, it is indeed a load of hairy ball bag. Yeah, there's been a lot of ball baggery recently. Apologies if I miss you out. If you're in the chat room earlier that I can't now at the moment see because it's cached out. Hello to everyone. Sonia White, hello. And Gypsies, hello. I know saw earlier. I can't see it now. Well, yeah, as I said, hello to everyone. I'm sorry if I missed you out. The chat room's only showing me so much. Rachel Jane, hello. Manas Moon, hello. And CMB, hello. And Chugging the Troll Express, hello. Sounds like you're ready to talk some shit, mate. Yeah. Well, you can fuck off and talk shit elsewhere because you are just a troll and that's a shame. Ersatz Mode, hello. Hope you're all right. Yeah, the trolls will troll and we will laugh at them. Anyway, thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for giving us your attention for a couple of hours. We'll be back on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel talking about new stuff. And
well, what news there is, Cookie? I mean,
yeah. Hey, it's Corona.
Yeah, I've got a strong suspicion what we're talking about, but yeah, we'll be back Wednesday.
Yeah. And check out Steve the Goose on his channel, Steve the Goose channel, on Thursday night for the mystery show. I said he does mainly esoteric stuff because for me, that's he doesn't get stuck on just news and media and news articles and stuff, right? He talks about bigger picture stuff. That's why I feel it's more esoteric. You know, he digs a bit deeper, talks about things in a more expansive fashion, which is great. That's why I like his stuff. Yeah, and he does play and brilliant voice, brilliant singing voice as well. Yeah, and there's a lot of that at the moment that we need because, as I was ranting about earlier, the system is reliant on using fear to manipulate people. if you can build the courage to get through that fear, see through that illusion, that fear, false evidence appearing real, that phantom menace, that's how we're going to, keep moving forward through all this bullshit. So lifting the spirits and reminding people that the year has begun again. Spring has come back. Whether there's a virus or not, the spring is still here. The sun has been shining here in the UK. The weather has been really good. There is still that opportunity. Things could go either way based on your actions, what you choose to do, and whether you choose to see through this bullshit. So try it. Yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thanks again, folks. Cheers. Click the button.